50%. And distal femur, and the less common is clavicle and scapula. Different percentages are shown in the figure. In pictorial review, classical classifications of osteochondroma are not available. Hence, there is a clinical classification of solitary or multiple hereditary exostosis. We have made a preliminary effort to classify osteochondroma. These are the types. Pedunculated type. There are various X-rays showing. This is a proximal tibia, again proximal tibia, distal femur and distal femur. This is a pedunculated type. Now this is a sessile type, which have been classically described. We again describe, these are the again radiographs showing sessile type. And we have tried to describe one more type called spike-like, where there is a projection of exostosis. You can see again various bones are, radiographs of various bones are seen here. The distal femur, the distal radius, the proximal tibia. You can see again the radiographs of distal femur and proximal humerus.
You don't have pointer? Pointer please, pointer.
Okay. Yeah, this is distal femur and again proximal humerus. Again we described a bossylated type. You can see the distal tibia, the proximal femur and the proximal humerus here, and the proximal femur again in the different radiographs. Same again the bossylated type of osteochondroma. The Bunyan or subungual type was the osteochondroma of the distal phalanx. Again I will show the radiographs. You can see osteochondroma of the phalanx. Distal phalanx of the first finger. We again found another type of osteochondroma, os myocytes ossificans. You can again see there are various X-rays. The commonest elbow is the commonest site for myocytes ossificans. This is again X-ray showing the elbow joint and a type of osteochondroma. You can see, and proximal femur and the hip joint. We also found some unusual locations like scapula and clavicle. You can see there is osteochondroma of the scapula. Again the picture showing osteochondroma of scapula. The various effects of osteochondroma were they had scalloping effect, erosive effect, invasive effect and mass effect, causing stiff shoulder, coxa vara valgus deformity, genu varum and valgus deformity, cubitus valgus and varus deformity, and again manus, valgus or varus were there. Again few X-rays showing the distal ulna osteochondroma, sessile type, and fibula osteochondroma of the fibula. This again, this is distal ulna. Coming on to the pathological basis of osteochondroma, osteochondroma is the only bone tumor that has been able to produce experimentally. Following are the suggested pathological changes: separation of epiphyseal tissue from the parent tissue, epiphyseal plate from the parent tissue. It is believed to be cartilaginous metaplasia of the periosteum. It could be a defect in the periosteal cuff of the bone. Single defect explains a solitary osteochondroma, and multiple explains hereditary multiple osteochondromatosis. On gross examination, coming on to the gross examination, on gross examination, an osteochondroma is a irregular bony mass with a bluish grey cap of cartilage, as we all know. Base of the lesion has a rim and a cortical bone and central cancellous bone in continuity with the parent bone. Normally, the cartilage caps ranges from 1 to 3 mm in thickness. Over 2 cm of cartilage after skeletal maturity of renewed growth of a dormant lesions are signs of possible malignant transformation, which is again a complication of osteochondroma. It can go into malignant transformation. MRI is the best imaging modality available for visualizing the cartilageous cap and the surrounding tissues, soft tissues. Coming on to hereditary multiple exostosis, it is a familial osteochondromatosis, or it is also known as diaphyseal eclasis. Hereditary multiple exostosis was differentiated from solitary lesions in the solitary form of osteochondroma in 1786. It depends on the number of lesions and the degree of deformity and the rate of malignant transformation. Again, a genetic study showed that genetic linkage analysis confirms the presence of a locus on EXT1 chromosome 8 and additional loci on chromosome 11 and 19. These function as tumor suppressor sites. Inactivation EXT gene leads to formation of an exostosis with subsequent inactivation of a second EXT gene causing malignant transformation. Management: osteochondroma needs excision only when it causes any symptoms, like when it compresses on a nerve or a tendon, or it causes a bursa. That's what we have described here. Troublesome exostosis should be excised. Multiple exostosis with malignant transformation should be treated like secondary chondrosarcomas. Complications are, as I said, it could be a cosmetic complication or osseous complication, or it could be a pathological fracture of the peduncle, or there could be a neurological sequelae due to compression of the osteochondroma, compression of nerve by osteochondroma, or it could go into a malignant transformation. We have tried to classify it based on the study of 150 cases. We have solitary lesions were classified as we have basically classified into solitary and multiple. Solitary again subclassified as pedunculated, sessile, spike-like, bonian, os myocytes ossificans, drumstick, miscellaneous or bizarre type, and multiple solitary type associated with multiple deformities, associated with other syndromes and malignant transformation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your nice presentation. I think we will take questions at the last because the time is short. So thank you very much. I invite the next speaker. Next speaker is here. Dr. Gulia, please start your talk. Dr. Gulia will be speaking on oncological outcome of extremity soft tissue sarcomas treated with multimodality management in a single center subset analysis from a phase 3 randomized surveillance. Dr. Gulia, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, everybody. I'm going to talk to you about our oncological experience of treating soft tissue sarcomas at Tata Memorial Centers, and greeting from my center where I work. I also get you greetings from just recently established Indian Musculoskeletal Oncology Society, which was launched in September, and I welcome all of you who are interested in treating sarcomas to join, and the information is there at imsos.org. As I said earlier, that all these patients are treated at single center with same multimodality management, and this is specifically a subset of a randomized control trial, which is a phase 3 trial, and we have taken this subset. As all of you know, that sarcomas is the mesenchymal tumor, and the most common site is extremity, and all these patients are best treated with multimodal management, which includes chemotherapists and radiotherapists along with us surgeons. So the main objective was to assess the oncological outcome of non-metastatic soft tissue sarcomas with multimodal management, and that was a subset from phase 3 surveillance randomized control trial, which was done at Tata Memorial Hospital from January 2006 to June 2010, and it was approved by Institutional Review Board. Inclusion criteria were all the patients up to 65 years, extremity soft tissue sarcomas, non-metastatic at presentations, which were proved histopathologically and were operated at our center. This is the algorithm which shows that how these patients were managed. All the patients went through this algorithm, and the treatment was decided by a multidisciplinary team. And this is the subset analysis, where out of total 500 patients recruited in the trial, we had 141 soft tissue sarcomas, and 82 were more than 10 centimeters major chunk, which is exactly reverse as compared to the Western series, where the sarcomas, the numbers are in this category, which is less than 10 centimeters. 125 were high grade and 16 were low grade sarcomas. Predominantly affecting the male, and 40% of these tumors were recurrent tumors, which is again a huge difference from other Western series. As expected, the middle age is the main age affected, showing peak in 4th decade. So this we have discussed, the size and the high grade of this one. And the diagnosis, we had the highest number of synovial sarcoma, which forms about 45%, others was spindle cell sarcoma 20%, Ewing's and chondrosarcoma forming a small chunk of this large trial. As expected, thigh was the most common site of affection, followed by leg, forearm and arm. And coming to results, limb salvage was done in about in 121 patients, and 16 patients underwent amputation. This is a graph which shows how the adjuvant treatment was given. Chemotherapy only was given in 12 patients, chemotherapy with radiotherapy in 37 patients, radiotherapy alone in 64 patients, and 24 patients did not receive any sort of adjuvant therapy. Again, analyzing the adjuvant received, you can see that 24 patients had no adjuvant, and remaining this chunk showing the distribution of the adjuvant therapy. Coming to adjuvant RT, which is one of the most important adjuvants in treating soft tissue sarcomas, 36 patients did not receive RT altogether. Out of 101 patients who received RT, 12 patients had brachytherapy as shown here in one of the pictures, and 89 received preoperative or postoperative external beam radiotherapy. As these tumors can involve a lot of skin, and as I showed that 40% of the tumor had were recurrent, so we had to excise big scars. About 31 patients required local or free plastic covers. This is these are the few cases which showing the examples of soft tissue sarcomas. This is one of the case of the proximal femur, where it was very close to the proximal end of the femur. It was excised along with the hip joint capsule, which was reconstructed by mesh. Another example which involves the skin high-grade sarcoma, which has been reconstructed with the help of a pedicle ALT. Another case of high-grade soft tissue sarcoma of the thigh, as you can see here, the vessels are involved and are encased. This was resected. You can see the vessels being resected at both the ends, tied there. This was reconstructed by artificial graft and then covered with help of appropriate flaps. This is one example of soft tissue sarcoma of the heel. This is the picture after excision, which required a reverse sural flap for reconstruction. Another example of the case of soft tissue sarcoma of the back, as you can see, it's a superficial lesion involving the skin, so and you can see the scar going right up to there, up and down. So all these scars have to be excised during the surgery, and this patient required a pedicle flap, and at the same time we have done brachytherapy along with the flap. So coming to surgical complications, we have our share of complications. 28 patients had complications. Most of them were superficial infections. Some patients had local wound problem. We did not require any intervention and healed with conservative management. 6 patients required additional flap or additional surgeries for their wound necrosis. Coming to oncological outcome, 71 patients are completely disease-free. 11 had local recurrences. 15 had both local and distant, and 40 patients, the major chunk, had distant recurrence, which is the norm for high-grade sarcomas. So at the final analysis, 12 patients were lost to follow-up, and remaining patients are follow-up up to date, with a mean follow-up of 43 months, ranging from 4 to 83 months. Currently, 73 are alive, 43 are dead, and 9 patients are alive with disease. This is the Kaplan-Meier curve showing the disease-free survival at 47% and overall 5-year survival of 62%, which is quite good. These results have been recently published in CORI in 2013 and has been accepted worldwide. We also compared the results with the international studies, and we can see that the results are comparable except for a few Western studies, and we try to analyze them, and we saw that the most of the tumor in the studies are primary and are very, very small tumors. So otherwise our results are comparable. So to conclude, this is the largest single institution data on soft tissue sarcoma, which has been developed with same multimodality management for all the patients in a quite short period of time with the same group wide excision with radiotherapy provides good local control for all high-grade sarcomas. Most of the failures occur distantly and requires aggressive multimodality management for the management of these distant recurrences. Role of chemotherapy is still debatable, though there appears to be a little bit advantage, but it's not well established. There is a need for new targeted chemotherapeutic agents, and we require large multi-center studies to fine-tune the role of chemotherapy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Gulia, for finishing in time.
Thank you, sir.
We will take question answer at the end. Now I invite next speaker. Please come. He is Dr. Vishwas Pai, oncological outcome of extremity synovial sarcoma treated with multimodal therapy.
Good morning. Greetings from Orthopedic Oncology, Tata Memorial Center. I am Dr. Vishwas. I will be speaking on oncological outcomes of extremity synovial sarcoma treated with multimodality management. Soft tissue sarcomas are rare malignancies of mesenchymal origin. Synovial sarcoma is still rarer, accounting for 8% of all the sarcomas in the world literature. They are typically associated with a reciprocal translocation between the SYT gene situated on chromosome number 18 and SSX gene situated on chromosome number X. Surgical excision remains the treatment of choice, and there is lack of Indian data on this malignancy. Our aim was to determine the clinicopathological characteristics, prognostic features and survival analysis of these patients. It was a retrospective analysis of a prospectively maintained database. Patients operated in TMH between 2006 to 2011 were included. During this period, there were 512 cases of soft tissue sarcoma which were operated, out of which synovial sarcoma formed the 25%. Now, each patient underwent a detailed clinical history and examination, a local imaging in the form of an MRI, biopsy. At our institute, we do the J-needle biopsy, and whenever a patient had a biopsy from outside the institute, we reviewed it with our pathologist. Staging was done with the help of a CT thorax to rule out the lung mets, and ultrasound axilla and groin for upper limb and lower limb respectively to rule out the lymph node metastasis. Now, each patient was discussed in a multimodality clinic which had a surgeon, a radiotherapist, a medical oncologist, a radiologist, physiotherapist and an occupational therapist. And we base our treatment on these guidelines. These are the guidelines proposed by Tata Memorial Center in their evidence-based medicine. Now, coming to the patient characteristics, the majority of the patients were in the economically productive age group of 20 to 40 years. This stresses the importance of limb sparing surgery in this malignancy. Male is to female ratio was around 2:1. 10% were metastatic to start with, and all of these patients had mets to the lungs. As ours is a referral center, up to 50% of the patients had some intervention done outside, which may be an inappropriately done biopsy, an incomplete excision, or a complete excision but with inadequate margins. Coming to the site, 80% of the tumors were situated in the lower limb, with thigh being the most common site. 19% were in the upper limb, with forearm being the most common site. Then, in spite of all the efforts, up to 20% of the patients required some form of amputation. When limb sparing surgery was done, some form of plastic reconstruction was required in 17%. This may be in the form of a free microvascular flap or a pedicle flap. These are some of the patients treated by us. This was a recurrent synovial sarcoma of the upper thigh, which was infiltrating the femoral artery. So the tumor was excised along with the femoral artery and reconstructed with a PTFE graft. The resultant defect was reconstructed with a rectus abdominis muscle flap. Now, this was one more recurrent case of synovial sarcoma of the upper leg, which was thrice operated outside before referring to our institute. We excised the tumor with the periosteum of the tibia and then reconstructed it with a free anterolateral thigh flap. It's not always the big tumors which create the problems, it's the small tumors at critical locations also create some problems. This was a 3 into 2 centimeter synovial sarcoma situated on the palm, which was excised with the perineurium of the median nerve, and the resultant defect was reconstructed with a pedicle radial forearm flap. The functional outcome of the patient was quite good. Now, coming to the final HPR, 4% of the patients had margins microscopically involved, and in up to 50% of the patients, the size of the tumor was more than 5 centimeters. 70% patients received radiotherapy, which had 11% pre-op, 80% post-op, and 10% intra-op brachytherapy. And for 60% patients received chemotherapy, which was efosfamide adriamycin based for 6 cycles. Coming to the results, 12 patients were lost to follow-up, and median follow-up was 37 months. Post-operative complications, 17 patients had some form of wound complication like a wound infection or a wound dehiscence. 5 patients had post-RT wound breakdown, and 5 patients had major chemotoxicity which required ICU admission. Now coming to the recurrence, 33% of the patients had distant recurrence, 9% had local recurrence, and 8% had both. Now when we see, when the margin was positive, up to 40% of the patients had local recurrence, whereas when the margins were free, less than 3% had local recurrence. This stresses the importance of an adequate surgery. Coming to the survival analysis, 3-year overall survival was 72.5% and disease-free survival was 54% in the non-metastatic group. When we did the univariate analysis to find out the prognostic features, we could find that size more than 5 centimeters and involved margin status were the most important factors predicting long-term survival. When we compared our study with the other studies in the literature, we could find that in terms of local recurrence as well as survival, they were comparable, although the survival was slightly higher in the Western studies. So to conclude, synovial sarcoma are best treated with a multimodality management. Limb salvage is safe and possible in majority of the patients. Tumor size is the most important prognostic factor predicting survival. Site, margin status and use of RT also impact prognosis. Further studies are required to define the role of chemotherapy for this rare malignancy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now the last speaker of this session, hand tumors, a study of 110 cases. This is a very challenging malignancy, tumors of the hand. You have to save the function of the hand, which is very critical.
Yes.
Please start with your presentation.
Respected Chairman and dear delegates and my friends. This is the study done in last 30 years in the hand tumors. A series is done in the 30 years of my service. And the benign tumors of the hand, malignant tumors of the hand, tumor and tumorous lesions of the hand is a mere classification. Benign tumor of the hand, there are series of cases are there, lipoma, xanthoma, fibroma, hemangioma, neurofibroma, and glomus tumor, Brown's tumor. There are so many tumors, more than a dozen tumors are there. The malignant tumors most of the time in the literature and my series also osteoclastoma, osteosarcoma, chondrosarcoma, and Ewing sarcoma and synovial sarcoma, and also some of the metastatic lesions are also noted. The malignant hand tumor, the tumorous lesions are so many, even from the infection to the small histocytic lesions are there, rheumatic hands and other things will be there. The common hand tumors of the wrist are ganglia and cyst, giant cell tumor of tendon sheath, inclusive cyst and carpal bossing and enchondroma and giant cell tumor. The hand tumors, most of the time benign tumors, tumorous lesions and malignant tumors. In our series, there are giant cell tumor of the 29 cases, chondrosarcoma 2 cases, osteosarcoma 1 case, synovial sarcoma 2 cases, glomus tumors and also neuroma and neurofibroma, septic dactylitis and spinal intoja and tubercular wrist, rickets and so many. Only we have taken few cases for this study. The enchondroma is most of the time it is present in the multiple solitary type and painless to the painful type. Even this malignant transposition is also noted in some cases. And it is a very commonest tumor, most of the time it is noted. And also there is a pathology of the enchondroma is in a central type, and also there is some sort of the epiphyseal and metaphyseal noted, but it is usually metaphyseal, the diaphysis will be encountered. And the short long bones and short bones are commonly affected, even the long bone is noted. Treatment of enchondroma, curettage will be there and other things. There are so many types will be there. Even the excisable site excision is noted, and also curettage, bone grafting, and sometimes it is a benign malignant transposition is very late features. The glomerulonephrioma, otherwise called as a very small tumor at the tip of the fingers, pain and swelling and different, and this is the 80 years lady we have treated in 30 years back. When I was an assistant professor, at that time I have treated. Here we have very small tumor, you have tried to curate it first, then it was not cured, and your tip you have excised along with a small bony piece. Pain and tenderness and cold sensitivity are the triad of the glomerulonephrioma. And the none other plus diagnosis is readily available with the tip of the finger. Whenever she is doing small to big work, there is a tip sensation will be there. Giant cell tumor of the tendon sheath is a very commonest tumor next to the ganglion. The ganglion is otherwise also called xanthoma. And also these tumors are the excision is a very common. Excision is the treatment of choice, and it is a full recovery will be there. Recurrence is also in small cases. This ganglion is also there, but the bone cyst is a very rare tumor. We have two cases where there is a distal end of the ulna and also tip of the finger, index finger, we have noted. The neurofibromatosis, traumatic and non-traumatic also noted. We had a patient with a trauma followed by a neuroma, and we have treated with excision. And the neurofibroma of congenital variety, I had a 30 cases series of a giant size tumors where there is the neurofibromatosis also noted 5 to 10 cases. This is the traumatic neuroma of the tip of the little finger. See, this lady had a trauma followed by a pain that was excised, and it was confirmed by biopsy. This is one of the rarest tumor in the world literature. There is a tumor of a median nerve where the involvement was there, we have excised completely and confirmed by the biopsy. But the one, my surprise, he had a full function, only the question was there after the complete excision. The nerve was involved but we have separated and we excised. He was a rickshaw driver. After the excision, he was doing very well his duty of the rickshaw driving. This is the mucoid cyst. Mucous cyst is a very rare type of the tumor of the hand. In my series, most of the common tumors are osteoclastoma, distal radius, phalanx, metacarpals, even the ulna I had noted. The giant cell tumor of the tendon hand, most of the time it is also one of the commonest. The osteoclastoma, the giant cell tumor of the tendon sheath, and giant cell tumor, that is osteoclastoma, there are the two commonest tumors of the hand in our series. And these are the series. I had 110 cases of series, 115 cases series of the osteoclastoma. In that series, my 30% of the patients are the osteoclastoma. Here we have done ulnarization, excision. There are 2 dozens of treatment protocols have attended in the tumor overall, and also the tumors of the hand and osteoclastoma behaves more aggressively. Here the excision is the more commonest treatment of choice, because recurrence is very common in osteoclastoma of the hand. One patient I have treated when I was the junior most teacher in the Karnataka Medical College, Hubli. He was an SSLC student. Now he is living, his daughter is doing SSLC, and we have done 4 surgeries, but his hand is functioning still. This is one of the rarest tumor, the digital chondrosarcoma. In the world literature, there is a series of digital chondrosarcoma. There are 24 cases have been noted. In my series, this is the one cases we have been noted. And he was the 80 years man who had a very classical tumor of chondrosarcoma with a very classical picture. We have excised and treated. It is one of the rarest osteosarcoma of the
Kindly sum up, please, time is over.
Yes. The synovial sarcoma, septic dactylitis, Concludes, more than 3 dozens of lesions of the hand are discussed in the textbook of oncology and orthopedics. Tumor and tumorous lesions are not classified and grouped. We have made a preliminary collective effort of presentation of tumor and tumorous lesions of the hand. Thank you one and all.
Thank you very much. Please, next speaker, please. Next speaker is malignant bone tumors around knee, Dr. Rita Dyuti Mukhopadhyay. I think the person is not here. So, with the permission of the house, I take question answers on this topic. I invite questions for the first presenter. All the presenter I request to come please here on the dais to give the answers. First presenter, osteochondroma, a study of 150 cases. Anyway, you can answer, no problem. Any question, please? Osteochondroma. Yes, yes, welcome.
I must congratulate Deepak and Dr. Kaladgi Senior for everybody from Karnataka knows how well he keeps and how his interest in tumors, and that's a very nice case series of osteochondromas, and we know that most of the cases are Dr. Kaladgi Senior's efforts. What I have a few comments and a few queries. Number one query is, sir, I wanted to know what is os myositis osteochondroma, because that I want to know, number one. Number two, have you followed these patients in terms of seeing that what was the percentage of hereditary multiple exostosis, and in those patients what is the incidence of malignant transformation? Was it a cross-section study, or you have followed these patients for a long time? Because I feel this is this data may be very important from Indian perspectives, that how much, which percentage of osteochondromas have hereditary disease and how many get transformed into your malignant transformations.
About malignant transformations, you know, I have just begun my career. As you said, it's all, most of them are my dad's cases. So he has been following, it's a 30-year study. He's been followed up, and that the conclusion was based on that follow-up only. Few cases, because most of the cases come from rural setup in and around Mysore, so we couldn't be able to follow most of the cases, but few were followed, and there was a very rare incidence of transformation into malignant osteochondroma. Those which were transformed into malignants, those were treated like secondary osteochondroma, secondary osteosarcomas.
Correct, exactly. So we want to know that how much of percentage of your all osteochondromas were a group of hereditary multiple exostosis.
As I said, like most of the cases we were not able to follow because it was a rural setup.
So basically we are lacking follow-up.
That is the limitation of the study. That is the limitation of the study.
Limitation of study, because most of the patients come from in and around the place which where study was conducted. It was a rural setup, so we were not able to follow up the cases.
Anyway, the point is well taken. Point is well taken. I have one question to ask.
Yes, sir.
And one comment to make. What is your line of treatment in osteochondroma of the distal ulna and the upper fibula?
Based on the symptoms, sir. If the patient, as I said, osteochondromas small in size do not require any treatment. If they cause any cosmetic, if it is a cosmetic concern for the patient, then we excised. Otherwise, if it was like causing a
No, my question is, if you go for surgical treatment, you will excise the upper end of the fibula or only the tumor, lower end of the ulna or only the tumor?
Only the tumor.
Only the tumor.
Only the tumor.
Okay. But I prefer excising the upper end of the fibula and the lower end of the ulna, because the person function remains almost
remains
normal.
same, yes.
Thank you very much.
There is
Next,
a
please.
The excisable sites which are not causing any functional disability, that can be excised.
That can be
There is the
excised.
upper end of the fibula, there is no functional outcome is there, you can excise very happily. And also distal end of the ulna also you can excise it. But the recurrence will be there, the complication will be not there, excision is the good treatment choice for the upper end of the fibula and upper end of the lower end of the ulna. And the osteochondroma myositis ossificans, it looks like an myositis. but we have asked no history of trauma, no massage and other things. Thereby we put it as mass occipient osteochondroma as an exostosis classification. But not published, but that was my lack. That is right. Okay, right. That is as massific, it is we have made a preliminary effort. No classification of osteochondroma is available in the world literature. Only solitary and multiple are there. We have made a preliminary classification. That is an osteochondroma of the multiple type, solitary type, and the
Okay, enough for osteochondroma. Now Dr. Gulia, please come. Any question to Dr. Gulia? Any question? His topic was soft tissue sarcomas. Dr. Gulia, I have one question.
Sure, sir, I'll be happy.
Have you done any metastatectomy in soft tissue sarcomas?
Absolutely. As I mentioned in the data that we had 40 patients who had only distant metastasis, 15% of them had lymph nodal metastasis and remaining 85% had pulmonary metastasis. When the patient presents with the distant metastasis, we restage the patient again in terms of the nodal and pulmonary metastasis. If it is resectable, then if the whole disease can be taken out, then we definitely go for lymphadenectomy and pulmonary metastectomy, and generally these patients then have second line of chemotherapy, or if they have not received, then adjuvant chemotherapy.
What is the prognosis after that?
In this study particular, we have taken all the patients who are non-metastatic to start with. So you are seeing an overall survival of 62% at the end of 5 years. But the patients who have had metastasis and were completely resected, the overall survival is about 30% in them. So it comes down drastically down in those patients where you get any metastasis, but they were much better if they had only nodal metastasis as compared to their having the pulmonary metastasis.
But prognosis is little better with nodal metastasis, but practically we say nodal metastasis, they are taken as distant metastasis.
Loco-regional metastasis, and that's how in the 2013 fresh classification, they have taken the nodal metastasis as a different staging group, where they have added one more group where the nodal metastasis have been categorized or staged differently from the pulmonary or bony metastasis.
Thank you. Next speaker, please. Any question to the next speaker? Synovial cell sarcoma. He has presented his paper on synovial cell sarcoma. Any query? So, with few comments, I am going to wind up this session. Regarding the first osteochondroma, friends, every osteochondroma will not be simple osteochondroma, it can be chondrosarcoma also. So, one should not jump to excision without biopsy. Every case needs its own inspection, its own clinical examination and its detailed MRI study, because many such tumors, they turn out to be chondrosarcoma. Yesterday one person was showing, and regarding the second one, soft tissue sarcoma, Dr. Gulia has very nicely explained. I will just like to add, in sarcomas, the grading of the tumor is very important for predicting their prognosis. Despite everything, radiotherapy, chemotherapy and surgery, friends, Dr. Yadav once said, I still remember those words. For an individual patient, there is no remedy, there is nobody on the earth who can predict what will happen. And after doing all these things, we must pray to Almighty that the patient should remain all right. Nobody can predict about metastasis, even if initial presentation there may be no metastasis. Synovial cell sarcoma, I have 2 words to add. In the upper, the more proximal the soft tissue sarcoma, the more bad is the prognosis, because it is detected late. The more distal, whether in hand or in the lower limb, the prognosis will be good because it will be detected earlier. And in case of upper limb, when limb saving surgery you are doing, even if you have to sacrifice 1 or 2 nerves, even then the function of the hand will be useful to the person. You may have to sacrifice, but don't keep the nerve at the cost of the tumor. When you are doing excision of such like tumors, friends, these are damage control exercises. These are not cosmetic surgeries. Forget about cosmesis, forget about function. If some function has to be sacrificed, it has to be sacrificed, but the tumor must go. And in tumors of the synovial sarcoma of the hand and feet, there is a special word of caution. These patients present very slowly, it is only the suspicion of the person. They keep on presenting with mild pain for 1 year, 2 years, and when it gives aggressive pain and start fungating, only then it is diagnosed if you are not careful. So with this, I wind up this session. I thank you everybody for their patient listening. Any suggestions, still I have 1 minute you can give. Otherwise, thank you everybody. Now if the house permits, can I start with the second session on basic research? We are going to start with the second session. If the speakers are there, otherwise we have to wait, no other alternative. This session will be on basic sciences. You are here, please come. We will start, no problem. This is radiographic versus ultrasonographic monitoring of fracture healing, which is better. Dr. Biswajit Sahu, please start with your talk.
Respected Chairman, esteemed teachers, and my dear friends. I am here to speak something about the recent modalities of monitoring process of the fracture healing. A radiographic versus ultrasonographic monitoring of the fracture healing, which one is better? From long time we are using this radiography as the modalities of management or modalities of fracture classification, treatment, and in deciding the functional outcomes in the fractures. As all of us know that the fracture healing goes through these processes of hematoma, inflammation, which leads to soft callus formation, which when gets mineralized goes to hard callus formation, and thereby it leads to remodeling. These fracture healing outcomes, all of us know that it can lead to union or delayed union, non-union or malunion. Why this monitoring of the fracture healing is important? Because it's used to know the prognosis of the fracture and to analyze the complications. The methods we commonly use to analyze all these things, they are the clinical examinations and the radiography, but sometimes they give increased false negative results. So this radiography has been used as a primary imaging modality for the fracture management and in deciding the outcomes. They depend on the X-rays and the radio opacities of the tissues. But ultrasonography has come out a little late, and it depends on the principle of ultrasonic waves, depends on the echogenicity of the soft tissues and all. Mostly used till now for the evaluation of the soft tissues, and you use commonly for the ultrasonography of the pelvis and the abdominal structures. So my objective in this study is to compare the efficacy of radiography and ultrasonography in monitoring the fracture healing process. A study has been, a prospective follow-up study has been done in the Department of Orthopedics in our medical college in Odisha. What we included? We included this study, I included mostly tibia fractures, acute, closed, mid-shaft tibia fracture, which are treated by interlocking nailing, always statically locked. The evaluation protocol was done, every fortnightly follow-up was done till the establishment of the fracture. It was all the cases were examined clinically, and as well the investigation was done either by radiologically and ultrasonographically. So what are the criteria, how you use these things? The radiographic criteria, all of us know that the progressive with the breathing callus, there will be increase breathing callus, progressive increase in the breathing callus, and the fracture gap will gradually progressively it will decrease, and at union the bridging callus will be seen in all the 4 cortices. But regarding ultrasonography criteria, it's a relatively new thing. There is periosteal callus, there will be progressive increase in the periosteal callus. As the fracture progresses, the nail appearance will progressively decrease, and at the union there will be complete absence of the nail in the ultrasonogram. Statistical analysis was done. So a total of 92 cases were assessed for eligibility, but due to there are some 28 cases were excluded, 64 included in the study. Again, these 10 patients were excluded due to their developed infection loss to follow-up. So total 54 patients were analyzed, out of which male were 37 and female were 17. Most age group was 20 to 35 age group. Mode of injury was mostly road traffic accident. Most of these they included 42 A2 classification, and follow-up was done most of the cases were in 12 to 14 weeks. So most of the cases, in 44 cases, they resulted in union. So what happened in union case? This is a union case, how it progressed. In ultrasonogram, see this is the nail. This is the nail size which appear in ultrasonogram. This is a fracture. This is nail size, nail is seen in ultrasonogram. But in X-ray, nothing is visible at 2 weeks. It's just well reduced fracture. At 4 weeks, what happened? At 4 weeks, see the nail size is gradually decreasing. The nail size is gradually decreasing. The callus has started forming at the fracture site. This is the nail, this is the callus. Okay. Same 24 represent 4 weeks. Then what happened at 6 weeks? And 6 weeks, the nail size is gradually decreasing. In ultrasonogram, the nail size is decreasing and the bridging callus is much more. Then what happened after 2 weeks? At 8 weeks, same patient, see the nail is not appearing, nail is not visible, very faint line, absolutely not visible.
Time is getting short.
Yeah, it's a periosteal callus is, bridging callus is much more. So at 12 weeks, ultrasonogram already it has union has seen, but here the bridging callus is finally appeared in X-ray at 12 weeks. So what happened in delayed union? So delayed union, nail is visible, bridging callus is there but not adequate. What happened in non-union? See, non-union the nail is totally prominent. There is no union at the fracture site, gap at the fracture site. So union cases, so in ultrasonogram we see the union quite early, around 8 to 10 weeks, most of the cases. But union in X-ray, this the yellow one is, you see a letter at 10 weeks, 12 weeks.
Please
This
conclude, please
yeah,
conclude.
This is non-union cases we detected quite earlier. Delayed union again by ultrasonogram we detected quite earlier. So coming to discussion, so X-ray modalities all of us know, we frequently use X-rays as the modalities of management in assessing the prognosis. So what about ultrasonography? It's a new thing. The advantages are clear and it detects the fracture outcomes quite early as compared to X-rays. Results are predicted by almost 3 weeks, around 18 days or 21 days, around 3 weeks. The results are known 3 weeks earlier. The sensitivity is almost 100% and the specificity is around 80%. But what is the disadvantage of this newer method, ultrasonograph? Disadvantage is costlier and it needs a trained personnel. So pitfalls of my study is that it's a very small study group, early experimentation, and I have decided only on one anatomical region. So to conclude, the USG or ultrasonogram is a rapid method, it's a simple, it's a free from radiation, can be used very safely in pregnant women and the children. It's a better and efficient tool for monitoring the fracture healing. So I will conclude that ultrasonography should be considered as an attractive alternative in diagnosing the fracture monitoring process. Thank you for your patient hearing.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please. Next speaker is here. Evaluation of, you are the next speaker. Please come, please come. Evaluation of clinical outcome of intra-articular platelet-rich plasma injection in primary osteoarthritis of the knee. He is Dr. Rahul Kaswan.
आगे कैसे होगा, इसी से करना ना ना, ये करेगा, ये नहीं डॉक्टर राहुल के नाम से। हाँ, good morning to everyone. Myself Dr. Rahul Kasan from Orthopedic Department, PGIMS Rohtak. I am presenting a paper on evaluation of clinical outcome of intra-articular platelet-rich plasma PRP injections in primary osteoarthritis. Introduction and review of literature. Osteoarthritis is the most common type of arthritis, leading cause of disability. It is uncommon in adults less than 40 years of age, highly prevalent in more than 60 years. It is more common in female, and major risk factor is obesity. It is a dynamic phenomena, both joint destruction and repair process. In destruction, there is articular cartilage softening and disintegration and osteonecrosis. Repairing processes include new bone formation and remodeling. It is a heterogeneous and multifactorial disease, failure to respond to wear and tear by mechanical stress. It is primary and secondary mainly due to trauma and pseudogout, onchronosis, hemochromatosis. Both the composition and mechanical properties of cartilage significantly change. Decrease in proteoglycan, decreased local synthesis of type 2 collagen, and molecular messenger interleukin, TNF, BMP, nitric oxide are usually increased. Presenting symptoms are pain, stiffness, swelling joints, sign joint swelling, deformities, local tenderness, crepitation. These are the X-rays showing narrowing of the joint space in the medial contact, and sclerosis, cyst beneath the articular surface. Osteophytes may be on the margins, remodeling of one end. These are the conventional treatments: analgesic, physical therapy to improve muscle strength, maintain joint mobility, decrease loading on joints, shock absorbing shoes, using walking sticks, avoiding climbing upstairs, and some chondroitin sulfate and glucosamine orally is also used. Diacerin, it's slowly acting, and it directly inhibits interleukin-1 synthesis, but it has no role in the cartilage healing. Intra-articular steroid, it is anti-inflammatory, very short duration, should not be given repeatedly. Intra-articular hyaluronic acid, it is visco supplementation is there, it is costly. These are the surgical procedures: arthroscopic, some osteotomies are there, arthroplasty and arthrodesis are there. Valgus high trivial osteotomy are there, and the final in advanced stage there we go for the arthroplasty. In now platelet plasma injection, platelet alpha granule contain mainly growth factor which improve the cartilage healing. Platelet derived growth factor GF, transforming growth factors, acid and basic fibroblastic growth factors, insulin like growth factors, epidermal growth factor, it all increase in PRP injection. PRP, it amplification of chondrocyte proliferation with convincing clinical effect on degenerating knee cartilage, also increase hyaluronic acid concentration in osteoarthritic knee. Materials and method. The present study was carried out in the Department of Orthopedics, Surgery, Paraplegia and Rehabilitation in Pandit B.D. Sharma University. A minimum of 50 patients with osteoarthritic knee of either sex were included in this study. Pre-injection workup was detailed history, clinical examination, X-rays both in standing position, anterior AP and lateral view. Patient classified with various grade of the disease. Inclusion criteria: radiological diagnosis of osteoarthritis, grade 1 to 3 osteoarthritis according to Kellgren-Lawrence, and clinical symptoms more than 3 months. These are the exclusion criteria. Now the preparation of PRP. Prepared in the Department of Blood Transfusion on the day of application from the patient's own blood. 43 ml of blood is taken from the antecubital vein, anticoagulated with citrate phosphate dextrose adenine, CPDA, with the ratio of 1.1:6 to the blood. Then 10-minute centrifugation at the 2000 RPM. After centrifugation, blood laid in 3 basic components because of different sedimentation coefficient. RBC the lowest level, platelet the middle, and platelet poor plasma at the top. Red cell layer is down. Remaining part we go for the second centrifugation for 10 minutes at 2600 RPM. There is blood centrifuged into 2 layers. The supernatant is platelet-rich plasma. 3/4 of that is discarded, and lower part is concentrated platelets. Residual PRP approximately 6 ml, integrated with 10% calcium chloride at the ratio of 6 to 1 for activation. Now the injection procedure. Affected knee is exposed, proper cleaning and draping. The site is superiolateral. 20 with the 20 gauge disposable spinal needle and 10 cc syringe, aseptic dressing after the injection. Patient instructed to bend and extend the knee several times so that the equal distribution of PRP throughout the joint. Patient discharged from OPD. The advice that given to the patient is if cold compression for 24 hour, full weight bearing, oral antibiotic, levofloxacin, OD, analgesic, brufen, SOS for 3 days only. Follow up after 1 month for next injection, then as per schedule after 3 months, 6 months and 1 year. Regular hamstring and quadriceps strengthening exercises. Do not take any oral analgesic during the period of follow-up. Evaluation of the results. Follow-up started after the last injection after 3 months. First follow-up at 3 months, then 6 months and final at the 1 year. At follow-up, we do the clinical examination, symptoms and signs according to VAS score and Coos scores and the WOMAC score. This is the visual analysis score. And this is the Western Ontario McMaster University Osteoarthritis Index. Now results. 12 patients, 24% had adverse effect at the time of injection. The various adverse effects were syncope, dizziness, headache, nausea, gastritis, sweating and tachycardia. 4% had pain and stiffness after injection for 2 to 3 days. There was no correlation of mean score of all WOMAC parameter with age, sex and bone marrow index. All patients, irrespective of age, sex, weight, height and BMI had equal benefit from the procedure. These are the results at the 3 months, 6 months and 1 year follow-up. Discussion.
Please conclude, please conclude.
These are the various studies according to the PRPs. The conclusion, PRP has emerged as a promising and cost-effective modality for treating osteoarthritis. Our initial followed-up results showed that the treatment with PRP injection reduced pain and improved knee function and quality of life with short-term efficacy in osteoarthritis. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Nice presentation. These are experimental studies, so it's very difficult to make opinion regarding them. The last speaker is here. Please come, please come. He will be speaking a short-term evaluation of treatment of chronic osteomyelitis with antibiotic-loaded calcium sulfate pellets